Thank you, David, for being here with us at this 15 INCIBE. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here with you, and also a real pleasure to see face-to-face events, particularly this one that happens every year in León. We all love the night life here in León. And I wanted to share with you our experience about the internationalization of our company, how we were able to make our company a truly international business. Some things went well, some things not so much. And I will try to make you see what things you should do when you aim for internationalization. We will see during this presentation a series of good and bad things to do and not to do things for improvement. It is true that internationalization of Spanish companies, when we talk about cybersecurity, is something that's not always easy. Most of our businesses start looking for the customers in Spain. This is the market we know the people. But really, the world is a totally globalized world, and I believe if we have a look at what happened in the last 20 years, we will see this in the following slides, we can see how almost always all the companies that make it big internationally in a global level are very similar companies that are normally created in Israel. Then they set up their marketing base in Israel, they make it big in the US, and then they move to Europe, to Asia, Latin America as their sector's leaders and keeping that leadership position. So this is something we have seen with many companies, from Checkpoint back in the 90s to the current companies. There are many of these. So this is something that has happened in recent years, and it's something that Spanish companies have not been able to reduplicate. Very often we try to compare with Israel, but we are light years apart when it comes to financing, when it comes to how doing things, our ambition, contacts, lobbying. As Spanish businesses, we're still very far behind. We can't really fight against them, but we can copy some of the things they do. They are always going to do the same thing because that has worked for them. So Israel could be a case for success. Normally they start in Israel. They all come from the army, from Unit 8200. It is impossible to have so many people from that unit. Everybody seems to come from that unit. However, it is supposedly the elite in terms of leadership, and then what they do is they seek finance. There are a lot of investment funds and venture capital funds. The government also supports investing in local companies, so it is easy to collect the necessary funds. You can easily get $5 to $10 million. So and also because there are very many companies already set up. If you ever had an opportunity to visit Beersheba in Israel, it is somewhere in the middle of the desert. This is where you have the hotspots from Cisco, from Microsoft, and they're always on the lookout for those local, smaller businesses to invest. So it is the perfect mix. You can get a lot out of that. And added to that is the fact that many people have already have the successful businesses there, and they come back and set another business. They already have the experience, the background, the contacts, and it is understandable that they continue to be the leaders in the world of cybersecurity because they have all the ingredients for success. On top of that, Israeli lobbying is very powerful. It is something that no other country has. No other country has the lobbying capacity as they do. It does happen in Spain sometimes through the Israeli embassy. They normally approach some of the IBEX 35 companies and they try to incentivize and move their own local businesses. This is something that I can't find anywhere else, possibly with the exception of the UK in terms of their lobbying capacity. So this is a handicap for the rest of the countries, and it is a great competitive edge for Israel. So it is clear that it is difficult to get to that point, but we must take this into account. Also, we must be visible from the onset, from the early stages. We have to be visible internationally. So the easiest way for this is to work with analysts such as Forrester, Gartner, IDC. At the end of the day, what they do is they write reports which are read all over the world, where they talk about trends, about sectors, about companies, and somebody living in Wisconsin and somebody living in South Korea who read the same report obviously it gives you good visibility. The problem we find there, however, is that if you don't have US-based businesses, to them, you are not very relevant. So you can have the finest European customers, but if they are not US customers, they don't like it, and you're not going to get as well positioned as you would like. Some examples of this are Panda, ourselves, for instance, or any example of a Spanish company who might not have many US business customers, and that's why they find difficulties. We also need to find our own inner champion. There are many analysts, and the objective is to try and see who, out of those analysts, truly believes in your sector, in your product, and can therefore help you feature in many of the reports. In order to do this, you are going to have weekly meetings, or at least monthly meetings, to tell them your news and your latest developments. So that actually requires a lot of time to be devoted. There are also fairs and events, RSA being the bigger one. Last year it was only online, but I think a couple of years ago it was about 35,000 people meeting there. It is a commercial event, but it is the place to be seen. Everybody expects you to be there. If you're not there, you basically don't exist. So you have to be there. It is a question of reputation, of image. You're going to see your potential customers, investors, and you have to be there because it's the only way. And Spain, through the ICEX, has been present at the RSA. There are other fairs, local fairs, such as ITSA in Hamburg, the Cybersecurity fair in London. There are many such events, and you have to be there and be visible. And then you have the awards. You have to be careful there because, in my experience, normally you have to pay and then you get an award in return. So when we see companies that have been awarded different prizes every year, you realize that at the end of the day it is something that you can pay. There is a way of being talked about. You feature on different magazines, but very often, again, you have to pay for this, and when you pay, you get the prize. But you have to be visible also through quality content. In our case, from the onset, we had a website in English, the blog is in English, the contents are all in English to give that global or international vision, not only thinking about the Spanish market. And talking about funding, this is also important. In Spain, we have improved significantly because any cybersecurity company is going to require a certain amount of funds, because until you have that product, you will not be able to sell. And there are cases of companies that do what we call bootstrapping. They don't require any investment, they create their own product, but most of us are going to need some investment and some funding. The sector has improved a lot. We have very good venture capitals now who understand the international sector, who have invested in many parts of the world, in the US, in Europe, and compared to 10 to 15 years ago, it's totally different. So let's use the experience of these funds who can guide us very nicely. We do rely on some Spanish funds, and they do help with contact, with strategy, with what things we should or should not do in whatever country, and without them we would be at a loss. For instance, when we tried to enter the US market, and we saw that in order to find outside funds in the US, you are typically required to be presently there, and sometimes these becomes a problem. You want to have a Spanish business or a US business. If you want an American bond, you're going to be required to be American, so you're going to have to physically move there, and you're going to have to make a series of decisions at some point. When it comes to creating international business, another problem we found is that, and particularly even more so today, it is difficult to find the right people. And it's not just a question of money, it's rather the fact that everybody's looking for people today. There are many people on the market, and there are a lot of investments on the businesses, and all businesses are searching for sales, engineering, staff, pre-sales, support, business intelligence, etc. Any sort of cybersecurity today in the US, it is very difficult to find that sort of people because everybody is looking for them. So how are you going to attract your company's talent? It is not just about money. Again, you can you can offer a good salary, but how do you attract them to your vision of what your business is going to be, how the business is going to grow? Here we are witnessing a war of talents, which is also a challenge. And it's a challenge that you need to overcome as soon as possible. And what we have seen is that typically it is better to hire local people in the countries rather than sending somebody to become sales representatives in the US. It is better to find someone local who has their own local contacts and who are going to do a better job. So you have to be careful when you want to create your international business, but let's be aware that it is difficult to find people, even if you use online platforms. In cybersecurity, we use platforms such as Ninja Jobs, where you can find some people, but the moment you are interviewing someone, they tell you that they already have 4 other offers with basically the same salary, but maybe they have better stock options, or it's a more advanced company, or maybe they are offered a better salary or package. So it is a true and active war going on at the moment. And this has a lot to do with the US. If we are going to focus on the US, what we have learned is that you cannot just send somebody to explore the country and see what happens. That does not work. You have to make it big. You have to bring a lot of money with you because salaries are high, and you can't just go with 2 or 3 millions. That's not going to take you very long and very far. So if you want to create a team, you should create a local team. You should to attend events and fairs. You have to meet local analysts and work with them, and at the end of the day that requires a lot of money. And what we have learned in our experience, that you have to really make it big time. And if you want to enter the US, I believe that in cybersecurity this is where you have to be, because at the end of the day this is where most of the leading companies in the sector are. So you have to be up against them on the same ground. Obviously this is a battle ground. You can see that this is very accelerated compared to the Spanish market, but there are also many capacities and many opportunities. At the end of the day, there are many businesses. The market is a lot bigger, and the need for investment is also greater. There are many companies competing for the same bids and projects, and they will do whatever is within their hands to push you out of the way. I have seen things over there that I've never seen in Spain. We have been attacked in so many ways, and they are very aggressive indeed. So you have to think about salaries. Obviously, normally you should offer high salaries. Just to give you an idea, $200,000 as a basic salary plus the bonus is something quite normal. It's not an extraordinary salary over there, so you have to be ready to invest big time on the country, and that's why I said that you're going to need good investment, because otherwise you will fail to create quality people and teams. People come at cost at the end of the day, and if you are to find the right talent, you have to be ready to pay the price. Otherwise it might take you months to find someone, and that's going to cause you a million problems when it comes to executing your plan. We also see that there are a lot of Buy American. This is something that is all the rage over there. There is a kind of a protection of the market, and sometimes they think, well, I may buy your product, but where is your business? And although we do have a subsidiary company in the US, an INCIBE company, but they often ask us, where is the leadership, or where is the CEO based? Who are the investors? behind the company. Those questions, which I never expected to begin with, are questions that they get asked. And not just the governments, but rather the businesses themselves, banks, cryptocurrency companies. They have that concept of buy American very present, and invoicing a non-American business is very difficult, if not impossible, and it does come also at a cost. So you have to have it clear that if you are to sell in America, you have to look American. This is something I learned, and otherwise it's going to be very tough, because you are going to be put aside unless you have something that is easily sold. But the B2B world is complex. And for Europe, I think that picture tells us a lot. What we have learned is that each country is a mini world. Every country has their own thinking, their own language, their own way of working, and it's totally different to work in France as it is to work in Italy or the UK. They work differently. In France, they normally prefer to work with French products. They don't like buying American products. Everybody has to be French. Obviously, they speak in French. All the material is in French. Whereas in Holland, for instance, they are more open. They are open to Spanish or American products, for that matter. And in each country, you're going to have to adapt and to change certain things. Each country has their own local affairs and local events. You have to hire local staff. Again, this is super important. And obviously, try to seek partners in those countries. For instance, in the case of France, to make your product more French, so to speak, or in Germany, to make it more German. So having local people to your side. And when it comes to creating an international company, what we have seen is that there are cultural problems and constraints. At the end of the day, when you work with someone from the US, with someone from France or Colombia, it is different, and that creates a series of cultural differences and nuances that can pose a problem. You're talking about diversity, being careful with some of your vocabulary, for instance. You might find words or expressions that are normal here, but they can be offensive in the US. Local customs and ways of dealing with people when it comes to greeting them, also time zones and things like that. You have to have a clear picture of all this. So to summarize, what is important is for Spanish businesses to be international from the very first moment and early stages. And again, I'm thinking about the US because I think that's the big market and where we can learn a lot. It's going to be difficult, it's going to be full of challenges, but you have to be there. In Spain, we have loads of talent. There are many companies with ambition and with readiness, but we have to take the leap. We lack the kind of ambition that Israelis have. From the onset, they want to move to the US, to make it big there, and they are already leading in Israel, and they want to lead in the US. But we already have examples. This is something that we didn't have before. We have companies such as Alienboard, but also Lenovo, the Devo, and there are some colleagues from Devo here, companies who were born here but who managed to make it big in the US. So we have those examples to reflect ourselves on, and the more examples we have, the better, and we will follow suit, looking at what Israel is doing, and I think you can get a lot of advantages. And that's all from me. I hope that you find my talk interesting, and thank you for your attention.